Hi everyone, this is the Do3 podcast. This is for anyone who loves swimming, cycling or running, or of course, likes to do all three. My name is Dave Knight and I'm a professional triathlon coach based in the UK. Along with my excellent co-coaches, who you'll get to know along the way, we spend our daily lives helping those who love to swim, bike and run. We want this podcast to inspire you, motivate you, make you laugh and cry, have fun and learn a thing or two. We want to help you get the most out of the sports that you love. I'm glad you found us and we hope you stick around. Welcome to the Do3 podcast. Hello and welcome to our first ever Do3 podcast. So first of all, we have an amazing interview with award-winning mind and body coach Kim Ingleby later on today. So Kim will talk about how she's worked with athletes, both professional athletes, showbiz personalities and others to try and help their performances by working through their anxieties and their fears and to remove mental barriers to unlock their full potential. That's what's coming up, so stay with us for that. It's a really good interview with Kim. But first of all, this is our first podcast, as I've just said. Obviously, we thought long and hard about how we're going to put this first podcast out, what's going to be the content, and what kind of message we want to get across. So I just want to take a few minutes here just to run through what the idea of this new Do3 podcast is all about. So first of all, Do3's aim is to help people get the most out of the sports that they love. And in our case, in the name, because we're called Do3, we're talking about three sports: swimming, cycling, and running. Albeit it doesn't have to be in the form of a triathlon. It can be individually, but they're the sports we're focusing on. So we're here to educate, inspire and motivate. And we're going to be doing that through a series of workshops and seminars. And in this case, our podcast. Just a little bit about us. We're full-time coaches. This means we spend every single day with athletes, physically alongside them, watching them, helping them, and obviously training them. And as such, there's nothing we haven't seen. We are with literally hundreds and then thousands of athletes across the weeks, months and years. So we have a huge amount of experience here, actually hands on deck, helping athletes day to day. We have a wide range of athletes that we help, from absolute newbies and kind of up and coming age groupers, world and European level age groupers, and also professional triathletes too. So we've got a huge breadth of experience here at Do3. So we kind of like to think we know what we're talking about. In terms of the message we're trying to get across really is that sport is to be enjoyed. I think a lot of time athletes kind of get too bogged down in the performance side of it and they start to lose the love of the sport. Whereas for us, it's really important that you guys maintain that love of the sport. As soon as that kind of love starts to go, then the performances very often can drop too. And a good way of actually maintaining that love of the sport and getting the most out of it is by becoming part of a community. Triathlon has an amazing community in general, and also obviously the individual sports do. But at Do3, we have our own community, and we would like to invite you to become part of that as the weeks and months progress. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast. We believe in keeping things simple. So we will be giving you various kind of messages and giving you information and top tips and all that kind of stuff. And our idea really here is that we try and keep things nice and simple so that you can understand it. If you don't understand it, we go into kind of loads of jargon and super detail, we'll lose you. And it needs to be things that you can understand and you can put into practice. So that's the kind of message and the kind of flavor that we're trying to bring to the information, the podcast that we're bringing to you. We are super big fans of age group athletes. So we're not all about pros and all the elites and all that kind of thing. We love age groupers, particularly helping age groupers on their journey into the sport, getting them into the sport, getting the most out of them and getting the most out of their training and their racing. And we talk about that because age groupers have a hard time. You know, we understand that age groupers don't have decades of kind of elite level training behind them. They're coming at this as normal people with busy lives, busy jobs, children and all the other baggage that kind of life throws at you. So we want to try and help age groupers to overcome these kind of barriers and hurdles that are there naturally in place. I hope that kind of makes sense, but that's certainly what we would like to try and help you do. So what's going to be happening in our podcast? Well, we're going to be doing hopefully doing a podcast every week. And we are going to do, one week is going to be like an expert interview. And like I say, this week we've got the amazing Kim Ingleby. The next week we're going to have an age grouper interview, and we've got Claire Boswell next week. Now, Claire is brilliant. She is an open water swimmer. She got into open water swimming about 5 years ago, and it has really turned her life around. She's lost 6 stone in the process. She's taken herself off antidepressants, anxiety tablets and that kind of thing, and really genuinely turned her life around. So that's next week's podcast. So if you're into open water swimming and you want to get some motivation, listen to that, because it's a brilliant interview. So that's age group interviews. We're going to do a coach's Q&A. So if you want to send a question into our podcast and we'll answer those questions for you during the podcast, then drop an email into podcast@do3.co.uk and we'll get those answered for you, or as many as we can anyway. So another week is going to be a coach's Q&A. And then finally, on the 4th week, we're going to have a deep dive into a particular subject area. And over the weeks and months, we're looking to really kind of try and help give you as much juicy, golden nuggets of information that you can take away and use. So that's the kind of order of the day. That's what we're planning on doing with the podcast across the weeks and months. So hopefully that sounds good to you. If you like the sound of all that and you want to hang around and follow us on our journey, then we'd really appreciate it if you could like the podcast, share it and subscribe to it, because those things really, really help us out. The kind of algorithms and all the magic that goes on behind the scenes, that's what really helps us push up the rankings, and more people that see us, the more people that we can help. We're also putting this out in the form of a video podcast on YouTube. So if you happen to be watching this now on YouTube, then hello. You can't see me waving clearly if you're listening on the podcast. If you're on YouTube, please ring the bell to say you like the video and subscribe to the channel. That would be amazing too. But that's it for now. That's it from me. And we'll get into the podcast. Kim Ingleby, thank you very much for giving us your time today. I hope you don't mind, but I've obviously got a few questions to fire at you this morning. And first of all, Kim, I've had a look through your website and kind of tried to get you to know you a little bit more as best I can remotely. And it says on your website you're a mind and body coach. I think if we start off with the basics, what's a mind and body coach, Kim?
Well, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone listening. I hope it's going to be useful. A mind and body coach, what is it? Well, I'm trained in personal training, triathlon run coaching, sports therapy, injury rehab on the body side. And I do a lot with the DNA testing, blood testing, hormones. And then on the mind side, I'm trained in NLP, hypnotherapy, timeline therapy, sports psychology, life coaching, that whole area. So my specialism is blending the two together. And how that came about is I trained initially over 20 years ago, and I had a lot of athletes that were physically becoming fitter and stronger and achieving great things, but mentally were still doubting themselves. So I thought I want to find some resources and tools that can help people mentally believe in themselves and help them overcome sort of any injuries or illness or accidents that may have happened that then limit them, or just to build their confidence to do what they really want to do and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
okay,
that's a brief summary.
Yeah. Well, being a coach and having been around the kind of the business for quite a while now, it's clear and it's obvious that it's the mental side that lots of people suffer with. Spend more time speaking to athletes about their mind and how they're feeling than actually the kind of the actual coaching, the physical element of it, if you like.
Yes.
So it's obviously hugely important. And obviously I'm aware that you've spoken to some of our athletes in the past and obviously helped those guys out. And you've got a really good, you've got a good reputation amongst our squad, if you like. So you've obviously fixed them up pretty well, Kim. So well done for that.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a privilege to work with anyone, as you would know, as a coach, but mentally it's a real privilege, because it's not like there's something tangible that you can give someone.
Yeah.
If you give them a physical training plan, they kind of know if they follow it and they don't get injured and they recover okay, they're going to deliver the race. But mentally, I can't sort of pop out their brain before and then give them a picture of their brain afterwards. So there's a lot of trust, and there's a bit of vulnerability, and there is also commitment from the mental side of changing your thoughts from a limiting pattern to one of more possibility and potential. So yeah, it's a privilege to work with people on the mental side as well as the physical side. And it's really rewarding when someone starts to just believe in themselves a bit more and have less limitations.
Right. Okay. Well, it's funny. On the way, I just walked to the office with my daughter. She was on her way to school, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm interviewing somebody today." And I said, I described you as a mental coach, because I thought that's what she'd probably most likely understand.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, what does that mean? Does that mean she gets them to do press ups with their brain?" Which I thought was actually quite an interesting and a neat way of kind of putting it. I mean, okay, so could you take us through? Well, first of all, who are the kind of people that you help? I mean, who approaches you for some help and assistance?
It's really varied. It ranges from athletes and individuals who are around 16 to 86 is my eldest client.
Okay, yeah.
And there's two types of people that I would say. I mean, there's many types, but two types. One would be someone who has either been injured, ill, had an accident, and then has a fear. So they're stuck with a specific fear of, normally, if we're talking in a triathlon sense, like swimming in open water, descending or climbing or turning a corner, coming to the run phase and, not being able to achieve it. So there's a specific fear. And the second type is they feel like they could do more, but they have these doubts and limits in their head. And that either comes from feeling like they're not good enough, comparing themselves to other athletes, or sometimes they've had a really good performance and they feel the pressure to perform, which is then stressing them, and they're finding it hard to get themselves sort of into the motivation of showing up and competing at their highest level again. So it's a kind of across the board, but it's anybody who has limits which are limiting them, or has a big dream, goal, idea, and they want some support with it.
Okay. I mean, some of the points that you mentioned there sound so true, and I've actually fielded some questions to fire at you a little bit later, and it's almost as though you've already read them, because
I don't know your questions.
No. It's almost
I'm open to whatever they are.
Yeah. Well, you've pretty much just run through them there. So
Okay.
Obviously, kind of hitting the nail on the head about what's concerning people. I mean, obviously, you coach people from around the world and all sorts of different kind of backgrounds and things. I mean, can you give us a bit of an example of the kind of people that you've been working with recently?
Yeah, a lot of it, as you would expect with any coaching relationships, really confidential, particularly when it's mindset. People need that trust. But of those that are happy to share, I just said to you, I've just come off a call with the GB Synchro team, and I'm doing some work with them ahead of the World Championships. And so they're in Europe at the moment. Then before that, I had a call with a client in Australia who's training for an Ironman, but is on the edge of burning out on, bloods, DNA, things like that. And just overwhelm of work, family, and training, and set himself really high goals. So I'm working in line with his physical coach of, how do we manage this? How do we manage his expectations? How do we help him with the mental fatigue and overwhelm, as well as the physical responses that are showing in the data. And yeah, I mean, those would be a couple. I've got a lot of age groupers. So some are competing, now in Romania, marathon runners, adventurers. I was presenting at a festival this weekend in Wales around mindset and connection and confidence. So yeah, it's varied, who comes to me. Interestingly, at least half is male, or they identify as male, which is, I think, quite unusual. And I seem to have, good results with anybody, which is great. There's a trust there. So it's not for anybody in particular. A lot of people say, I don't know if I need it, or I don't know if you can help me. And sometimes just that initial conversation is worth it. And because I've done it for such a long time, I'm quite a good judge of if it's going to be useful for someone or not, because we can have strategies that we've developed that maybe not the best, but they work for us. So like, if you're a physical coach, giving someone some new techniques for their swimming might not be appropriate leading into a race. It's the same for the mental strength and performance coaching side of, there's things that we can do for a good race setup that would be an individual session, but I may not work on some of the fears and the limits because that athlete's strategy works for them. It may not be the best, but it works for them. So the timing of when you help someone mentally is key, and also the trust and rapport between me and the athlete. So with some people, I'm like, someone else might suit you better. So I'm quite good at having the initial conversations to go, yes, we're a great fit. We can work together, or this person might suit you better, or this timing might suit you better.
Okay, and say somebody gets in contact with you for the first time, and I don't know, say they're an active triathlete, they're an age group triathlete. What would be the process that you would go through? What kind of conversation would you have first of all?
It varies, but the initial one is just tell me confidentially a little bit about what you're looking for and why you've chosen now to reach out.
Yeah.
And then second is like, what's your racing season? What races have you got coming up? So then I can go, this is what I would suggest would work for you, or this time would suggest. So yeah,
Okay.
It's very open, relaxed, to start with, just to get them sharing a little bit, and then we can go from there. And it's always good if have they read an article? Did they listen to a podcast? Did someone refer them? How did they find me? And I like someone to come themselves. So if someone says, can my partner, wife, husband, athlete that I'm coaching, can you get in touch with them? From the mental side, it's always really useful if that person gets in touch, because like mentally they're ready. So I always say, yes, here's my email or my number, get them to contact me, because that point of contact, I know mentally it's about the change process. So I know that they're ready.
Okay. So do you mind if we kind of talk through an example and just kind of go with it and see what happens? Okay. So say, obviously we have a lot of age group athletes, and they're all different levels from kind of newbies all the way through to kind of people that are qualifying, are challenging for world and European medals.
Yeah.
And obviously having been an age group athlete myself, and I think I kind of almost call it the Strava effect, in terms of that people are watching what you're doing and how you're performing all the time. And I think some people feel that pressure. They feel the pressure of their peers, and they feel the pressure of actually performing on the day, to the point where it can become a problem and can start limiting performance, become debilitating.
Yeah.
How would you kind of, I know I'm trying to ask you to simplify something into a few sentences here, and it's obviously a much more complex matter than that. But how would you start with an individual like that?
Yeah, no, it's fine. And obviously, I mean, each case is different, and some people are ready, as I say, and can change very quickly, and others take time. But there's two things there. One is the Strava effect. If someone is feeling really, really distracted and overwhelmed and continually comparing themselves on Strava, I often say, is that the best tool to be using? Or can you, how can we limit your comparison and get you focused on having your best training sessions, and what is draining your energy and what's a distraction? So like the boundaries around how you use Strava and how it can benefit you, because that comparison can become almost like an addiction to someone. So they're looking at all of the data in the other athletes. But as you know, sport is, you can't predict what's going to happen, but you can show up and do the best that you can do on the day. And so I think I would be looking at the things that are causing someone to feel under pressure leading up to performing to a race, and then working with solutions and strategies that might help to reduce that, knowing that a lot of the things will probably have been a habit. So it will take a little bit of time to shift, but we get the awareness of like what is happening and how can you shift that. Then going to the race specifically, I would be asking the athlete, like, why does this race matter to you? So bringing them back to their core why, because often if they've gone into comparison and judgment and expectation, they've forgotten their why. And this is across the board, whether it's someone doing their very first like sprint triathlon, or it's someone going for an Olympic medal. It's still like, why are you doing this? And I would ask that several times. So like, why are you doing this? Why does it matter to you? What are you going to gain from it? And almost ask that again and again, because the first responses will be stock responses of like what they think I want to hear or what they think everybody else wants to hear. The next exercise I would do is like, what do you need to do your best? So to do your best with this race, what do you need to do? And how do you need to feel? And what are the things that enhance your ability to do your best? Then not avoiding any fears. They would write their fears or their what ifs on one side of the paper, and on the other side come up with a strategy of how to overcome that. Now, a lot of people will be thinking, I think that anyway, but there's a real difference between pen and paper writing and taking that time to write it down and like read what you're writing and then go through like a mental rehearsal. And I call it mental rehearsal over a visualization, because then you're using like all of the senses, which works much better for most people. And that's like another whole technique. I wouldn't give all of this in one session, but hopefully people listening can take some notes and try each of them for maybe a week. So like over a month, they could layer those different things and work out like, what is their priority? Why are they doing this? What is their distractions and how can they change their habit? What's the internal story that they're telling themselves that is either a protection or a limitation? So most of the time we have an internal dialogue that's not helpful, but it's a protection and it's keeping us safe. So you have to understand why you have that to then be able to transfer to something that's more useful. And I'm much more about helping an athlete find their motivation, find their why, and have a helpful dialogue. I don't need them to think like, I'm going to be amazing the whole time, because that's unrealistic. But I need them to know that they understand themselves to be able to perform the best they can on the day. I don't know if that answers the question and gives some insights.
Yeah. So I guess some people will find it quite difficult to be honest with themselves and just you know, because you need to be honest with yourself, don't you? If you're gonna put all these things down on paper, and I guess a lot of people haven't even thought about things that deeply. You know, they just feel the anxiety and not quite sure where it comes from. So pulling it to pieces, I guess, is a good process in its own right.
Yeah, it's good that you said like some people may not have thought about it, and it's true. So that's about the timing. And so another thing would just be getting someone to focus on their breathing. So just when you were saying like someone might have a high level of anxiety, doing some of these exercises without the support, it might feel too much. That's why I say like chunk each section and choose the one that's relevant. But if someone is feeling like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that or I want to do it, just notice your own breath. Because most people, when they get anxious, they go into comparison, they go into judgment, they breathe like really high and short. And then that gives a stress response to the body to say we're under attack. And then that will drain your energy. So your performance will be affected. You'll have all the responses of like maybe an upset stomach or things pre-race. So just really ground yourself in breathing and using a technique that's from Mel Robbins, which is literally going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you pattern break. If you're stuck in the like, what if, you can do two things. Go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm okay, I'm going to do the best I can. Or you're like, and what if it goes okay? Because so often we forget the what if it goes okay. And we almost fear the okay. And in line with that, it's quite a British thing, but it's relevant to everyone, is that we're not very good at accepting a compliment. So if someone said, you've done well, or, that was a good race, it's always yes, but. There's always a but.
Yeah.
And I try and say yes, thank you. And then you can go, and then I'm going to work on this. or then I'm going to do this. But it's not a but, which then deletes the positive.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So those are more sort of simple top line things that, again, sound like they wouldn't make any difference, but genuinely, if you do them regularly, they do. So like before training sessions, take a breath, think about like, how do I want to feel with this training session? How do I feel? So if I'm like 4 out of 10, I haven't slept well, you're probably not going to smash the session. So rather than set yourself up for then beating yourself up after the session, take that breath and go, I'm going to feel calm. I'm going to work on, this part of my technique. I'm going to adapt this session. And then at the end, I'm going to feel more aligned and I've done a better session.
So you'd set people a series of exercises for them to go through when they start to question themselves or start to feel anxious as they're approaching an event.
It's quite hard to say exactly because it's different for each person because everyone's brain is different.
Yeah.
But if someone's come for, say, 1 to 3 sessions for a specific reason and a race, that follows one way that I would coach. So we work with overcoming the fear, then setting up the overall race plan, and then doing the mental rehearsal for that race and the outcome. The other, if it's more general, it's specific. So we would have specific writing exercises, breathing exercises. And then within it, hopefully my skill is the linguistics of the questions, of asking the right question at the right time to facilitate whatever is in the person's brain that would be helpful to share and then realign and retrain. It's interesting with the brain, though, myself included, that we have this sort of expectation that we should fix it in one session. Whereas, if you'd signed up for a marathon, you wouldn't then think you could run it the next day. And I always say the same of like, I love your daughter's analogy of like the press ups of the brain, that if you signed up for the mental training and you can do one sort of press up, you're not going to be able to do 50 after one session. I mean, I'd love to have like ninja powers, but like that's not how it's going to happen. But if you do the work over a period of time, you will then gradually evolve and think differently. But mental training isn't for everybody, because some people's strategies, they work for them. So, anybody listening, I would just find something from our conversation that resonates and try it.
Yeah.
Because then it's worth your time listening. And you're not going to lose anything by trying it for 3 weeks.
No. And I guess you need to be, well, I guess if they're reaching out to you, then they're obviously in need and they want some help. But I guess you need to be quite open-minded and to be willing to go with it and give it a go. Because do you ever get people who, when you speak to them, you kind of get the impression that they're already doubting what you're saying, and they might think it's a bit of mumbo jumbo or however you'd phrase it. Do you ever get people that you can sense the resistance?
I think it's more and more talked about now, the benefits of mindset and mental performance and mental health and mental wellness. So I rarely actually get anyone thinking that it's sort of mumbo jumbo that gets in touch, because they've already read enough that they know that it might help them. Do I get people resistant, fearful, not sure if it can work for them, etc.? Yes, and that's normal. And I always say I always have coaching. I think as a coach that's important, and I still sometimes show up for my, the coaching sessions I invest in and have resistance, have fear, have all the normal feelings, and that's okay. So yes, everybody is not ready in terms of like, I'm really open, there's resistance, there's fear, there's, what will I think, etc. But hopefully I hold, just like physical training, I think people have fear, signing up for that and putting an email and going, am I good enough to get in touch with you? And, could you coach me? And am I fit enough? And, all these normal fears. I think sometimes it's good to normalize fears. Like there's a level of fear that's normal.
Yeah.
It's if there's a disproportionate amount of fear that's not serving you. Equally, I coach loads of people that just want to improve. they're curious. They want to work with their minds. They want to enhance their performance. They want to enhance their life. It all filters into everything. And, some clients, Doug's one of them, he's written a book called The Renaissance Athlete. He's in his 70s. He's kindly shared lots, but I've worked with him for 10 years now, every month. And it's quite remarkable. And it's a real privilege. And it's really challenged me to work with him. But he is a classic, amazing example of like neuroplasticity. So how our brains can adapt to any age and how we can evolve. And yeah, he's a remarkable person. So,
So you don't,
what you want to do with your mindset is open.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say you've been working for somebody for that long. It's not as though you get people who come to you and they've got a thing, they've got a problem that they need to deal with, and you fix that and they go away again. Or it may not be one session, or it may be 3 or 4, but sometimes it's longer than that. It's an ongoing thing, an ongoing relationship that you have with people sometimes.
Yeah, is it just like the physical coaching? It's just the same. So some people come for a specific race. I need help with this. I want this, and it's like I work with them for 3 months, and that's maybe it, or maybe just one long day session, half session. And then others, just like any coaching relationship, I've worked with them month in, month out, and that's a mutually led agreement, and that it's beneficial, and it evolves really differently then, and it's like having. I'm their support system. I know them really well, and it's great watching them evolve. And so Doug wrote his book through lockdown. I said, "Do you want to carry your sessions on?" And he said, "Yes. Let's see what will happen." And then the book transpired, and he sort of kindly said that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't kind of continued the coaching, but the questions. And I think because my training is mind and body, and I've competed at age group level in different sports, I've got that understanding of, how the body works, how burnout works, how medical conditions work, within my own experiences and what I'm trained within, and then the mental side too. So it is kind of that whole, I see the whole person and the potential, and I genuinely do, and just really want to help someone believe in themselves a bit more so that they can go and do the thing and enjoy what they're investing their time and money in, so that it gives them what they need.
I do see a lot of people that they've kind of almost lost the joy of what they're doing because they're taking it so seriously, and it's like, again, I said it before, it becomes debilitating to them, just trying to have to perform almost for others rather than themselves. And it is a shame when you see people get to that stage where they're just, they do start to question why they're doing it, and they get so stressed and anxious. They've completely lost the joy of. I mean, sport should be enjoyed, shouldn't it? No matter, even if you're competing at the highest level, you should still be enjoying what you're doing. That's the way you originally got into it as a kid, or whenever you started. So it's a shame when you see people in that kind of position. It's a
really weird thing as well, that we think that we can't enjoy it if we want to perform hard, or perform at our best. And the Olympians that I've been fortunate enough to work with, that is fundamentally what we work on. Why are you doing this? Underneath, like, the medals and the deliverables that you are being given, and what enjoyment do you get from your sport?
Yeah.
And we take it right back to that. And if you can really remember that, like your why and what joy you get from what you do, and that's not going like all fluffy and ignoring all the hard stuff. I'm all for getting down into like why is it hard? But it's also important for your nervous system and your recovery, like physiologically, to remind yourself of what you're enjoying, to have that calmness in your nervous system of the agreement of, I want to do this hard session. And if I'm working with a beginner, I'm like, remember the feeling, when you start and you do those first couple of races and you can't believe you've done it and you have so much enjoyment, and then suddenly Strava, data, etc. takes over. You might always remember, what it gave you, and keep some of that and look at your whole life. The other thing with endurance sport is it's often wrapped up so much in our identity. So if we get injured, if we get ill, if we lose our motivation, we're like, I can't not do it, because then what will people think? And who am I if I don't have, 6, 10, 8+ hours of training a week. So that's another area that I will help people with is how do you navigate the identity? And if they've been a age group or pro athlete and they're transitioning out of that level, how do they navigate life? And who are they without what they were? And they are all of that and more, but it's something that, I can help people with. So listening at this point, I get people to write down like what brings you joy and what you do.
Yeah.
And I'd love them to share that with you, us. Because again, it's not a British thing, but it's just, I can't tell you how important it is. They're just the moments to share. So it's a good point.
I was going to ask you about it. You brought it up there in terms of do you deal with athletes, or how do you deal with athletes who come to the end of their career, say they're a professional athlete and they've had a successful career, and that's been their whole being. It's been their whole purpose of their life up until that point. It must be so difficult to go from that point to, where next?
Yeah. It varies, actually. For some people, it's really exciting. They've come to the end and the journey feels complete and they're ready to move. And so that's quite easy and it's quite fun. For others, yes, it's a process of loss and grieving to start with. They're grieving, which may sound too big a word, but if it's been their whole identity, they have to let go and understand what they have done, but also celebrate what they've done. And then there's normally a period of it's almost like emptiness of not really knowing, but being okay in that space and just going day by day with simple things that give them structure and routine. And then it goes back to the purpose of what will give you fulfillment and what will give you purpose and direction in life. And so we will start to look at the areas from a work point of view, from a life point of view, and look at the time that they were spending doing the sport and then what they want to, create in that time. So it becomes fun once someone has processed the transition. And I think people don't realize that it will be challenging until they're in it. So if I'm working with someone before, I will often pre-frame. So when you're in the off season or when you're not at the Olympics, what do you think you might do? So our goal isn't maybe completing the Olympics, it's how you feel afterwards. So we're sort of, I'm always have a duty of care to the next stage, not the end of the race, but the next stage.
Yes, no, absolutely. I always think about, I heard an interview with Victoria Pendleton a while ago, and she was talking about her career and looking back on her career. And she very much sounded like she was disappointed. She was left with a feeling of disappointment rather than being kind of absolutely, over the moon with her gold medals, kind of endless gold medals, multiple gold medals. She spent more time thinking about the silvers that she got that should have been gold. And it's always stuck with me. And I use that quite frequently with athletes in terms of no matter what level that you're at, it's quite normal for you to look back and look back at the things that haven't gone so well. It's quite natural for you to do that. And I often use that as an example to them, say even multiple Olympic gold medalists will still be disappointed sometimes in their performance, and that they won't see the positivity and the wins. They'll see the things that they consider to not be wins. And it's a real shame that people feel that way, isn't it?
It's also human nature. We're designed to pick up fear and disappointment, almost like as a protection. But if you can also find the wins and share the wins, that builds resilience. So the combination. So if you've shared wins and tiny things and more within yourself, you don't need to do it externally, but if you are sharing that, it builds the resilience. So when you do have the hard time, then you can manage it better. But I read an interesting article about Victoria afterwards when she said she was struggling with things and she actually just chose to go somewhere else. And I think I'm sort of sharing this correctly, and apologies if not, but I think she went to Mexico or somewhere and she went, surfing and took that time to process things. And I think that that's important. A state change can be really useful if the end of one chapter in life is happening, and you have, the ability to go somewhere else, that's useful. But you can do that in your own, home as well. You can change your routine and habits that state change things, and you can commit yourself to doing some different things in different communities that will also help. So there's ways that you can do it depending on your lifestyle.
No, sure, absolutely. Do you mind if we kind of change tack a little bit? And obviously, you mentioned.
Let's go.
you mentioned earlier about your past experience as an age group athlete. Do you mind kind of running through what your background is on that side of things?
A quick sports summary is I started with horse riding and competed for Scotland under 21 3-day eventing. Came down south. Long story short, basically couldn't fund what I wanted to do with the horses. Got a bike. First triathlon I did, thought I had a puncture, got off my bike, looked at the wheel, didn't have a puncture, realised I was just really rubbish on the bike. And then did a few races, and I think my stubbornness and determination took me to age group qualifiers, but I was not a good swimmer at all. I'd fallen off in water off a horse in open water, didn't realise that. Then as I jumped in open water with no apparent fear and then had a massive panic attack, because obviously my body remembered the fall off the horse underwater.
Right.
As I said, had never really ridden a bike, definitely never clipped in, and had done pentathlon, so could run. I was a pretty basic triathlete, went to age groups, loved it, went from being like, a last qualifier to probably, I think my best was like top 5, then got Weil's disease, got really ill, came back, never got back to high level competitive sport, did 10 marathons for charity, did a 100-miler in India, then had a couple of problems with my heart, and now just coming back to base level sport again.
Yeah.
So there's a very quick roller coaster.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there.
But I share all of that because sometimes you listen to podcasts and you think, oh, I couldn't get in touch with that person, or they wouldn't understand, or I'm not good enough, or all the stuff we talked about. And that's my roller coaster. Everyone's had a roller coaster, but and I've had loads of like normal injuries as well. And I really sort of credit, if that's the right word, my ability to navigate everything with the mental training that I've done. There's no way that I would be feeling how I'm feeling without practicing all the tools that I give all the time and having the resourcefulness in my brain to be able to adapt. So I'm really grateful for like what I know, because it's definitely helped me sort of navigate these things, but also the things I have experienced really helped me to empathize, but also understand where an athlete might be in their head. So when they're like, I fear this, I have been through some experiences that are maybe similar. Yeah. So then when I'm looking at the tools of like what I would give someone, I can find the right tool. So yeah, that's a quick summary.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's hugely important as that you can connect and you've kind of experienced some of the things that you speak to people about, for sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we try and focus on here is trying to help predominantly age groupers. And what motivates a lot of age groupers is listening to other age groupers and the way that they have overcome adversity, or have gone from nowhere to being, very successful in the sport, or have made smaller gains. They can connect with other normal people, if you like, and not so much with the elites and the pros. So we're really keen to kind of to share stories of other age groupers and how they perform. I watched your
age group is, sorry, jumped in there. Age group's amazing. It's just it's a very whole community. It's very supportive, and so I've competed, but I've also travelled with the team for years doing the sports therapy and the mental strength, and that's how I've worked with other athletes and met them. But it's brilliant because it can give focus to any age you are, and you can also, if you're lucky enough to be able to have the finances, you can travel to places that you wouldn't go to otherwise. Yeah. So there is a sort of cost privilege, but then if you take it locally, there's so many things that you can do now with triathlon. But if you can't, say, have a bike, there's other things. You can do an aquathon, and you know that's accessible to more people. And then there are some events where you can even hire a bike now, and I think it's Quest Stars, they do that, where they can actually give you a bike, and then there's other ones that you can do with a kayak. And so there's a great breadth of things that are open to people. And I share that because sometimes people get stuck in age group qualifiers. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you don't qualify. It does matter, and I respect that you want that, but also don't lose sight of the amazing things that you are doing. And maybe there's something else like around the corner that you could just go and do a fun sprint triathlon and see how you get on with that. So then we go back to joy. It's funny how people forget, like, say, you could just do that local sprint. They're like, oh no, that's going back. I'm like, no, just go and have fun with it. Like, go and do a fun race and then go and do an age group. And it might remind you of where you've got to, but also where your joy lies.
Yeah. And do things as a team, with teammates and with your squad and other friends and things like that. It's great to train and race with other people, isn't it? I think the relays are really good for that, and building kind of community and camaraderie and things.
They're really scary for a lot of people. You know, I know myself, like, you think, oh, am I good enough? And because it's an individual sport in a team sport, but at the same time, we're humans. Like, connection and community is just really important. That helps our mental health more than anything, is just having that camaraderie around you, wherever you find it, whether it's an online club or an in-person club. But just being brave and having that connection can make a massive difference as well. Yeah.
You mentioned, and I saw your TED Talks about, you spoke about several things, but you mentioned contracting Weil's disease and how that affected you.
Yes.
That seemed to have had quite a substantial impact on you as an individual. Do you mind talking us through that?
No, I mean, I'd first say, because whenever it's mentioned on any endurance podcast, people panic. I swam for 10 years open water, had no trouble at all. And I've been back in the water, and I think it was just unlucky. What I would say is that I know now on reflection that I was overtrained and tired. But at the time, I was heading out to the Europeans, and I felt like I felt really good. But on reflection, I think I was overtrained and tired. So listen to your body and your instinct. Also, the water was cold, and although it was tested as clean, I could see lots of like stuff floating in the water. And just my instinct was like, you're tired, it's cold, I get Raynaud's, this doesn't feel right. But my logical brain was like, you need to race, you need to get into the water, you need to do this, you're going to the Europeans, get on with it. So that's just a little... it might not have been any different, but I don't know anyone else that got it, but I got it quite badly. And it really impacted my life for sort of a couple of years. And I didn't race then. And I haven't raced at that level since then. And I'm not sure, I've done the aquathon, but I'm not sure I have my balance is continually improving, but I don't know whether I've got that aptitude on the bike to get to the level for qualifying. And also I've sort of practiced what I teach, that things have evolved. And I'm a real believer in finding the other opportunities. So making good of where you find yourself, and sort of not spending too long beating yourself up or wishing or regretting where you're not, because you're not there. So you kind of like have to make your peace with that, I believe, because then it helps you go, so what is possible now? And finding what opens up. And that's a long process, but it's possible. And it can bring you different enjoyment and different opportunities that you wouldn't have had if it hadn't have happened.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago, that TED talk, or TEDx talk. I feel like I could do chapter 2 with another whole set of like insights and experiences on life. But yes, thank you for listening to it anyway.
No, it was part of my homework. preparing to speak to you.
Useful use of your time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was absolutely. If it's, what I'd like to do now actually is we asked for the squad the kind of the wider community that we're in contact with to send some questions in to fire at you. So I don't think there's anything particularly challenging that you need to worry about, Kim. So don't think I'm going to catch you out.
I love this
here.
I don't know any of the questions, and it doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
I'm just like, what's going to come?
Okay. All right. So, in fact, the first one, I'm going to drop them on the screen. Hopefully this will work. I might not. Hopefully, I won't cut you off. Is that working? Nearly. No, it's not working. I'm trying to drag them on the screen, but it's not working. Okay, we'll persevere without that.
Go with it.
Okay, so first one, how do you teach yourself to become less defeatist? We've kind of covered this a little bit already, haven't we? How do you teach yourself to become less defeatist about your weakest disciplines? Okay, so say you've got somebody who is a bit of a machine on the bike and in the pool or in the water, and their run is not so strong. How would you deal with that?
If it's quick fire, one, I would say you would ask yourself how you can be more helpful towards that discipline, because telling yourself you're rubbish at it the whole time means that you'll always think you're rubbish. Mm-hmm. If you flip it to, I am starting to improve my run, for example, by doing this and this, and I feel, more strong when I do this. So it's changing. You have to change the story, but to change the story, you have to write down what the defeatist story is, and then with a little solution next to it that's realistic enough for your brain to start to warrant it. Because there's no point in going to I think I'm an amazing runner, which is sometimes the affirmations people are given. If you're like, I'm no good at this, how can you go, I'm okay at it, and gather some evidence? So one is change the story. Two is pattern break it when you get stuck in the loop with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 3 is practically and technically get some training to actually help you with it. So spend the time to improve that discipline to a point that you're more comfortable with.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'll keep the fairly quick fire because there's a few to go through. How about calming the mental chatter or the overthinking? I see this particularly with swimmers when we're trying to do some technical work with swimmers, and you can see them almost become mechanical because they're trying to think so hard about what to do. What can you suggest they do?
Again, it's a process. If you have a busy mind, meditation is definitely not for everybody, and it doesn't work, if your mind is very busy. But being mindful of your thoughts is something that everybody can do. And asking yourself, what would be more helpful? And what's the purpose of this is helpful. Second, if it's actually going into a session, is going back to one of the earlier points of choosing how you want to feel. So setting the intention before you go into the session. And that's a conscious mental choice. And yes, your brain may go out into loads of chatter, but then you need to bring it back. And you bring it back by either having an anchor point. So each time you touch each end of the pool, you breathe in calm and you focus. So having that sort of physical touch point of where you are going to bring your thoughts back. And then if it's a technical thing, taking just one thing into that session. So say the coach, gives 3, 4, 5 teaching points. You, as the athlete, take one of them to work on. And you keep bringing yourself back as your brain goes off into these things, and bring yourself back to working on that one thing, because that will give you the focus. When you're given many instructions and you try and do them all, same from this podcast, you'll achieve none of them and then nothing will change. So this podcast, that session, you take the one thing that you feel you can work with, you choose how you want to feel, and you have the intention as you go into the pool of doing that. And then you can record that and see how you go with it. Yeah. The mental tracking, not on Training Peaks, you can do it, but just in a journal is very useful for seeing if you're stuck in a loop with a problem. And then how can you come out of that loop? You have to identify it and then start to change it, but you consciously have to change it. It's not just going to change overnight. You
obviously quite often you're referring there to making notes and writing down various, how they're feeling and that kind of thing. That's obviously a key part of your kind of strategy with people, to actually get them to get it out on paper and think about what they're going through.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is resistance to that. When you're saying,
Okay.
is there resistance? There's resistance to pen and paper writing. A lot of people are like, I can't write. I haven't written for years. I've never held a pen for like 20 years. My writing's rubbish. I'm like, I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
But if you read any sort of science and coaching thing around the mind in business, in successful people, journaling and writing, that there is evidence that it makes a difference. There is a neural connection from your hand holding the pen to the paper to what your eyes see when they see your writing. And that is like the press up for your brain, is having the journal that you write in regularly. I don't need the discipline of every day, because sometimes that becomes a habit that someone's not even engaged in. So they're just kind of doing it, but not engaging in it. I prefer you did it like 2 or 3 times a week, but with the commitment. But all the other things, so disregarding the writing, the breathing, the choosing of the feeling, you're asking yourself how to be more helpful, the pattern break of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the sharing of joy, the finding your purpose, discussing your purpose, building community connection. All of those things will help your mental resilience and enjoyment, and they don't require you to do the writing. So the writing is I would say, for someone that is ready and wants to do that development. There are many other things that we've shared that hopefully just taking one of those things will help anyone who's been listening.
Yeah, sure. Okay, right. Next question then. How do you keep the passion and purpose when times are tough for whatever reason and motivation flies out the window? What do you just say about that one?
When times are tough, you need to work out what you need. And so often we're like, I should feel motivated. I should, this is my passion. This is my purpose. I feel it's unrealistic to think, just like training, that your brain will always be on this curve. So I actually think for that question, I would say, if you're having a tough time, what do you need? Who is in your support circle? How well are you feeling? Go back to the basics. Are you hydrated? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Like, check in with those things. Do you need a sports massage? Have you had one? Have you had a rest week? Why has that passion, purpose, fulfillment gone? So are there other areas in your life? So grief, loss, work stress, family illness. So you're looking at those areas and thinking, how can I get the support, and how long will it be that it takes to navigate through that? And then you return to, like, why do I want to do this? Is it fulfilling me? Is it giving me a sense of purpose? Am I excited about it? So there's two sort of areas there. I don't know if that answers the question for the person. If it doesn't, they can let us know.
Okay, and Clodie, who's a swimmer with us in Solihull, has asked about how do you begin to do this when you're older? You've already mentioned that you've got a client who's in their 70s. So age is obviously no barrier. Do you think this makes any difference the older you get?
I can only talk from the age I am, in my 40s. But I would say it's different. It's different. Like every decade that I work with teaches me something, and my style, I can adapt my coaching to whoever I'm working with, and that's part of the training. I think if someone's open and willing and wants, they're curious, they want to, just see what can be done. Yes. And I have the evidence of working with Doug that's been remarkable to show me just quite how not only has his mental agility improved massively, but his overall health and wellness is the same as when we started, which, within that decade is amazing. And obviously the multiple things that he does, but he has kindly credited a lot of it to me, helping him think about how he might be able to live a fulfilled life in his 70s and what that looks like. So yes, Clodagh, you can do it at any age. I really believe that now. And when I was doing my TEDx talk, I spoke to a speaking coach who was 96, I think, and she just said, never stop learning and always have mischief and joy in your day.
Sounds perfect.
Remember that?
Always have mischief and joy in your day.
Yeah, and she also said to me, she said, what are you scared of with the TEDx? She's like, it's just another life experience. Get on stage, prepare, do it, and move on.
Yeah.
And she was just so to the point. And I will always remember those things. And it's kind of the same of like fear and excitement's the same in our body physiology. And so if you're really fearing something, remember that when you are excited, it has similar physiological response. So you could perhaps say, I fear this, but I'm also excited.
So did you're implying that you got nervous and had to prepare yourself for the TEDx talk then?
Oh, I get nervous all the time. I was nervous before today. Another whole chapter, but like at school, I would avoid any public speaking. I mean, literally avoid it totally. Really shy, really self-conscious, wouldn't have done any of this. So before any public speaking, any workshop, anything, I do loads of prep. I use all the tools I have. And the TEDx, yes, I did loads and loads of prep, incredibly nervous. But I always think that you grow from the things that you fear. You know, those things that I try and seek out things that I almost don't think I can do to challenge myself in a good way, to evolve. So I'm just human like everyone.
Well, it can be easy to forget that, can't it? When you speak to experts, then you can forget that they're normal human beings too, and have the same. It's the same with athletes, isn't it? Top athletes will have the same hopes and fears as beginner athletes. You know, it makes no difference what level you're at.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
And when I worked with the first elite people and Strictly Come Dancing pros, I was like, why would they need me? What can I do with them? And then I got over myself and was like, go and do the best you can, see what they need. And it's the same. We're all human. It was, really sort of humbling experience almost that I'd judged them of like they couldn't need me. And then, they're amazing and they are all of that, but also they have the same fears. And it also gave me the motivation to really continue to help people, because it doesn't matter who you are, unless you're you are your own best friend and you understand and you've got your own back, you're going to find it hard as you navigate the highs and lows of life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Kim, it's been amazing speaking to you. It's certainly given me plenty of things to think about. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
On social at Kim Ingleby, kind of everywhere. And then kimingleby.co.uk or energized performance.com. And just say you listen to the podcast, you've got a question, or you've got a joy you want to share, or you're interested in maybe coaching. There's no pressure. It's all confidential. Love to hear from you.
Great. Well, Kim, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for listening.
Cheers. Bye-bye. So that's the end of our first ever podcast. I hope you found that interview with Kim interesting. She's absolutely amazing. If you want to get in contact with Kim, I'll put her details down below so you can give her a shout. But I hope you found something that's going to be helpful and that you can take away and use in your own lives. We're looking to grow the channel and grow the podcast, so please, it will really help us out, help us spread the word and help as many people as possible by liking the podcast and subscribing to it and sharing it, all that kind of good stuff. Also, this will be going out as a video podcast as well. So if you want to watch us as well, we're on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video. And again, it'll help with all the kind of technical algorithms and all that kind of stuff. It'll be really, really great. We'll also put some links down to our social media down below if you want to follow us on all the social media platforms. What's really important, I mentioned the community right at the start of this podcast. Get involved. We've got our own Do3 community for those people that like to swim, bike or run, and the link to the Do3 community is down below. It's a charge of £1.99 per month, £1.99 per month, so a small monthly fee. Is more than worth doing that. You get freebies and discounts and all sorts of things in there, so it'll more than pay for itself. And it also helps us run the channel here as well. A little bit of income to help us run what we're doing here as well. So next time we've got an interview with an age group athlete called Claire Boswell. Now Claire is a regular open water swimmer. She's absolutely amazing, which is one of the reasons we've got her in. She tells a really motivational story about how she's gone from pretty much being at the end of her tether on antidepressants considerably overweight, and not in a great place, to finding the love for open water and really genuinely, and she says that herself in the interview, turning her life around through finding open water swimming and the community that goes alongside it. So it's a really great interview. So that's next week. So make sure you tune in for that. And again, subscribe, put it on your little favorites list within your podcast app, and you'll be good to go. But that's the end of it for today. Thank you very much for giving us your time. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.